If you like Psych with Mike, here's a couple of ways that you could really help us out. You could subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Psych with Mike. But the two things that would really, really help us out is subscribing to us on YouTube, search Psych with Mike, but also going to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a review and a comment. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. I'm trying to be better about not catching it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great.
Well, I'm not.
Why?
Yeah, because we've been having crazy technical issues, and that drives me insane. Technical issues drive me insane. And then I think, well, why? Like, literally, there is no technology-dependent work that gets done that doesn't occasionally have some kind of issues, right? I mean,
right.
That just never happens. Yeah. But for some reason, whenever it happens to me,
it's kind of like raising kids.
Take it personally. Yeah.
Things are going really, really well.
Yeah.
Why in the hell are they doing that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And why aren't they doing this?
Yeah. So, I don't know if if you and I have ever even had this discussion. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being best thing in the world, how much did you enjoy being a father?
I think I still enjoy being a father.
Okay,
Yeah.
But what would you say?
I don't know.
Because I'd be a 35.
Okay. I don't have an answer to that question. I don't know what you mean by enjoy. Do I feel like I accomplished something? Do you feel like I did a good job?
Okay, so
did my child make me smile?
Operationally defining the term. You can operationally define the term. I mean, whatever it means to you.
I am ambivalent about my answer because I struggle with my own sense of being an absentee father for much of my children's lives because I work so much. Mm-hmm. But looking at my children, I would say I did a good job. Mm-hmm. So I feel good about that. Mm-hmm. So I'd say 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Do you know what your favorite thing about being a dad would have been?
Standing back and being proud of my child for reaching some goal that they had set out to reach, or just watch them turn into nice people, meeting their friends and finding that their friends are nice people. I enjoy that.
Mine is when your kids are still little, they don't walk, and
putting them on your chest,
and falling asleep while they still have baby smell.
So see, that's my hesitation.
Holy
There's such a long
moly.
range of time. I've got a child that's 50 years old. So we go back a long way.
Right.
But I was just going to say, I love infants. I love babies.
I do too. And people, that's something that a lot of people don't enjoy are infants.
Oh my God.
I'm like, once they start walking, and especially when they start talking.
I love that too.
Yeah.
Playing word games.
But
with them.
it's more challenging then.
Watching them figure out how the world works and seeing their enthusiasm and their interest.
People say, oh, when a baby cries in the middle of the night, I'm like, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
What I like is you can put the baby down, baby be there when you come back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, until they crawl out of the crib.
Yeah, once they start self-motivating, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they say, here are steps. I wonder if I can get down.
Right. Then you got to worry about glass and light sockets.
Knives,
and, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just then it's never ending. Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about something that we've never actually officially done a show on, but is something that I am super aware of during the pandemic. So I wanted to do I wanted to do something first. I wanted to toot our horn in a previous episode that we were talking about giving yourself a break and, taking a deep breath. And it was about a different subject. But I want to point out that when the pandemic first started, we were doing weekly episodes.
Right.
Because nobody knew how long this was going to go on, but it was pretty scary.
Now we're doing monthly episodes.
And we said, people can go back and check this. We said, I think either the second or the third week of the pandemic, turn off the TV. stop being saturated by the message. And it wasn't until probably May when the CDC came out and said, stop paying attention to the 24-hour news cycle. So I just wanted to say, I think we were way ahead of the curve on that. I think we were the first ones. We were the first ones that I ever heard promoting that message. So I wanted to give us kudos.
All right. The sky is falling.
You don't care.
You know,
You're underwhelmed. Come on, admit it.
that perspective on that conversation doesn't impress me. Being the first. Being right impresses me.
Well,
being accurate.
Weren't we right?
And I think we still are.
Yeah.
And not just in the pandemic, but also in terms of the election and the post-election and the inauguration. You know, all that stuff that they agitate and stir up. Because one of the things that we are finding is that the depression levels are increasing as people are more isolated because of the pandemic and afraid, what if I get it? How sick will I get? Will I die? Will my family survive? Will we all be okay? You know, where should I wear a mask? Should I not? You know, all that garbage that just keeps getting inundated into our heads causes us to be depressed, to be isolated, and some of us it causes to self-soothe with food. And if we have food issues, that's a compounding factor that could be life-threatening.
And I've heard, and I won't say a consistent or even pervasive message about substance abuse, but I've heard that be mentioned, which is a no-brainer. If people are trapped in their houses and they're super depressed, absolutely. I mean, the incidence of...
I had a dream the other night.
Yeah.
And I don't smoke. And I've never done marijuana. But I had a dream the other night because after the election, like 4 or 5 states passed laws accepting...
Oregon decriminalized heroin.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they accepted the recreational use of marijuana.
New Jersey, and who were the other? I think there were 3 more.
There were, but I don't remember what they were.
Okay.
They weren't Missouri. So
No, they were not Missouri. No.
we can't even get the damn medical marijuana thing right.
Yeah.
Anyway, my dream was that I was sitting out in my backyard.
We live in Missouri, for those who don't know that.
My dream was that I was sitting out in the backyard smoking a pipe filled with marijuana, getting high. I told my wife the next morning I had the strangest dream last night. I don't smoke and I don't do marijuana, but I was dreaming about doing it, and I'm wondering if it's because of all the stress of this.
It is because smoking a pipe is a very existential symbology.
Well, yeah, and I'm an existential psychologist.
Well, no. I'm just saying that. So I think it is about your own anxiety and your own trepidation over things that are going on. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Could be. I don't know. It just was a weird dream to have.
But smoking, the idea there is that the ethereal smoke represents, you know, your feeling of the lack of stability and nothing's lasting.
You know so much and you're so articulate, and you don't smoke anymore.
No, not anymore. Yeah. And I didn't really ever smoke cigarettes. I remember when I first quit doing drugs, I thought I had to have a bad. And so
I don't know what that means.
I had to do something that was bad. I had to have a bad habit.
Right. I thought it was some kind of drug term.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a drug term, but it just means you have to have a bad. We tend to all have some bad habit, and so I started smoking cigarettes, and I am not even joking. I literally despised it.
Oh my God! I grew up in a household where everybody smoked. Everywhere, in the cars, in the movie theaters, in the airplanes, but in the house constantly. And I never was attracted to it. You know, it smells bad. It's nasty. Kissing a smoker's like licking an ashtray. You know, and your breath smells bad. Your mouth tastes bad. And like, why would you do that to yourself?
And I did. I mean, I forced myself to do it for a couple of months.
It's a learned behavior.
And then
but it also becomes addictive then. And then you know.
And I was standing outside the hospital where I worked, and I was smoking.
Yeah. You look around all the other smokers, you're like, well, I don't want to be with these people.
No, I was just like, what the heck? Yeah. This is more work than I'm getting anything out of. Why am I literally doing this? And I had almost a whole pack of cigarettes, and I just crushed them, and I threw them in the trash can. There were people standing around me that were crying.
Yeah, like,
because
why don't you give them to me?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
$2.50 you just threw away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I stopped that, but that was, I don't even know why I did that. But yeah, so we know it makes a lot of sense that we would see a comorbid increase. Comorbid means occurring at the same time. Comorbid increase in the incidence of substance abuse while we see this pandemic going on. But one of the things that may be hidden is an increase in poor decisions being made about people's use of food.
Yeah. And is that eating to soothe your anxiety, or is that eating because you're angry, or because your food control issues are the way you control the universe and the world? You know, if you're anorexic or close to anorexic, you have those tendencies and that need to control.
And for anybody who doesn't know, the definition of anorexia is anybody who is 30% below BMI, which is body mass index.
Yeah.
And so you have to be at that point
Super
to be
skinny.
diagnosed clinically. Now, somebody can tell you that you have an eating disorder and the way that you use food in a controlling manner is potentially abusive, but to clinically be diagnosed, that's what has to happen.
Yeah. Well, but there are other manifestations of that as well.
But so if people are using food in a restrictive way, then yes, I would say that's about control. If people are using food in a soothing way, the reason is because you have more serotonin receptors in your gut than you do in your brain.
Yeah. So I don't know where I was going to go with that. I was thinking about when I was in college, we used to...
Early onset dementia.
Yeah, I got it. Man, let's do a podcast on that if we can remember to do it. Let's see if I can come up with... I've forgotten where I was going. You go ahead and take the ball.
All right. So I think that a lot of people are not aware, even that work in the eating disorder field, may not be aware of the profoundly rewarding nature of eating abusively. So because you have all these...
I know where I was going.
Go ahead.
I'll come back to that.
Yeah, no problem.
It's people that were bulimic.
Yeah.
As a diet control measure. I can go out and eat anything I want, drink anything I want, and I'll go
regurgitate.
vomit. Because Romans used to do that. And they had vomitoriums at their orgies and stuff.
No, is that true?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. They go eat all they wanted and then, for days and then go puke it up.
My son's a Roman historian. I might have to ask him
about that. But at any rate, so they can track the progression of descent into illness by the difficulty of the vomiting. You have to put a pencil or your finger or a feather down your throat and force yourself to vomit. And then when you make progress, then you can go in and you can look at the toilet and think about vomiting and make yourself vomit whenever you want to. Then you lose control of it and you're going to vomit. You can't not vomit after you eat. So the control gets lost in the addiction. So people are alone now because of the pandemic. They are anxious and afraid because of the pandemic,
right?
And its impact on the economy, on their jobs, on their security, on their health. If they have health care, all these things are stirring the pot. And one of the ways they quiet that down is they eat stuff. And so when I was in college, we used to talk about the freshman 20. People came from homes where they had regular meals that typically they didn't fix. Parents fix them. And then they'd get to the cafeteria and they could eat all that they wanted 2 or 3 times a day. And the first semester of freshman year, you put on 20 pounds. It was a very common phenomenon. Now they're talking about the pandemic 15.
Right.
A lot of people at home are putting on weight. I think I saw a thing the other day, clothing sales. The big burst item for clothing sales over the last 6 months has been sweatpants. Because people are Zooming. You wear a nice shirt, you put on a coat and tie, but you wear your sweatpants or pajamas. And you just relax and you don't wear a tight belt and you don't have to fit in your pants anymore.
So in this article that I had sent you on the quiet and behind the scenes exacerbation of this eating disorder behavior during the quarantine and the pandemic, they were talking about, and again, this was a U.S. News and World Report article, and what they said is that 40% of people said that they would rather get COVID than get the quarantine 15.
Because of body image issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is I I grew up, I mean, I have, and I think most of the people I know have, comfort food designations, things that they crave when they are anxious or upset that help soothe them. Just because that when you were a child and that's what you would eat, when you felt safe, when you felt comforted or protected or what have you.
Because of those serotonin receptors.
Yeah. But so now that we don't feel safe, and many of us are somewhat more isolated. I have a couple of friends that live alone, and they're on furlough from work, so they're working from home, and they're very concerned about their health, so they don't go out and socialize. They don't go to bars or restaurants or things like that. They've ordered food delivered from Instacart or Amazon or Walmart, a lot of companies. So they're socially isolated, and they seek comfort foods. So the flip side of the comfort foods is very often they're not healthy, like ice cream, mashed potatoes, beans and cornbread, depending on what part of the country you come from. But that stuff will put weight on you pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And alcohol.
Absolutely. Well, and you then pair that with the idea that people are at home. The gyms are closed, and then they're open, and then they're closed.
And then they're closed again.
Yeah, and so people aren't
even if
getting
they're open, it may not be
much
safe to
physical
go.
exercise. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even though the science shows that gyms are, which is amazing to me, that gyms are relatively infrequent spreaders, and that it's more about being at home with your family or in a small family gathering where people don't socially distance, don't wear masks, that there's the most transmission.
The data in Missouri, at any rate, right now, the most recent data that I've seen says because we're having a spike, numbers are really going up. And they said that spike is coming from within small family neighborhood groups because you've known your next door neighbor for 15 years. You don't think anything of it.
Exactly.
You just go over to his house. You don't wear a mask.
Well, you would feel like that you would be offending them.
Yeah, and you don't know where they've been or who they've been in contact with. Like we had a case in Missouri this week of an election official who had been diagnosed with COVID, was supposed to be home quarantining,
and knew it.
He left home. Went to, or they, I don't know if it was man or woman, went to the election and worked the polls all day, went home and died. So now they're trying to scramble and find out in that particular precinct who had contact with that individual and how close or how much and are they at risk. And, so you assume you're taking all the precautions, you're being reasonable. I haven't been out to a restaurant in months, but I wander over to my neighbors to see how the heck they're doing because they're out working in the yard and I haven't seen them.
So let's take a break and we'll do more when we come back on the other side. Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them to listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. Think that the real problem or the concern that I have over this is it's easy to see when people, maybe not if they're living alone, but it's easy to see when people are abusing substances. That's something that people are going to identify. And I think we've gotten to a place in our society where it's easier to ask for help for a substance use disorder, that there's less stigma associated with it.
Well, and there's more knowledge.
Eating disorders are harder because
there's more knowledge. People have studied substance abuse and worked in the field for a long time and have information that eating disorders are so often hidden. I remember when I was teaching high school years ago, and I was teaching psychology, and we were doing a section on abnormal psychology, and so I did a lesson or two on eating disorders. And at the end of the class, this one girl, cheerleader, who was sitting there, didn't leave class. She was just frozen, and she started crying. The room was empty, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And she told me that she'd been She had an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
She was a cheerleader. The cheerleader sponsors two main strategies for supporting the cheerleaders was having them do a public weigh-in every afternoon before they did their practice session, and then having them sell candy as a money-raising device.
Yeah.
And on that squad of a dozen cheerleaders, I subsequently found out over half of them had eating disorder problems. But this particular girl was telling me that she had begun to use laxatives to try to control what she was, her volume content. And she now had lost control over her ability to go to the bathroom. And she was in trouble. She was in pain and she couldn't go. And she was crying and she like, my father will kill me. My father will kill me. I said, no, we need to get you to the school counselor because it's not my domain. I'm just a classroom teacher. They need to call your parents and get them in. You need to understand that your parents love you. They may be angry. They may be afraid. But they're not going to kill you. And we're going to get you some help and you're going to get better. And that's exactly what happened. We took her down to the counselor and turned her over to the counselor. The counselor called the parents. They had the conference. And the dad was not hostile and aggressive and explosive.
That's so good. Yeah.
The dad was like, oh, my God, we didn't know. She was a very bright girl. She knew how to hide all that stuff. But they got her in the hospital and got some help, and she got better. So, hallelujah.
And one of the things that I want to make sure that we acknowledge is that a lot of the stereotypical ideal that we have about eating disorders is
about
predominantly
all stereotypes.
female, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not true. So males are just as prone to eating disorder as females, and especially athletes. So they look super healthy.
Wrestlers. One of the biggest challenges in wrestling
absolutely.
is that you bulk up, you lift weights, you get yourself strong, and then you starve yourself so that you can compete at a lower weight grade. I mean, that's just obscene.
But so you have a situation, especially for the males in the population, where they may be experiencing this kind of abusive behavior of the eating either to control or to self-soothe, but because people don't typically recognize males as falling into the purview of an eating disorder, it's another way in which that it goes undiscovered. And so one of the things that I think we have to do as hopefully we come out of the pandemic, if there's a vaccine that's announced soon or not, I think that we need, once we get past the election brouhaha, we need to take an evaluation, the temperature, the mental health temperature of the nation. And we need to say to people, if there's anything that's going on that you have a question about, ask somebody. Don't just wonder in silence or suffer without asking for help.
I spent a lot of years teaching junior high, high school, and college. And in that age group from 13 to 25, there are a lot of issues with bullying, the definition of masculinity, of toxic masculinity. You get a young man with gynecomastia, what they call man boobs, maybe because of a testosterone deficiency. It may be other things, but they get bullied, they get teased, they get isolated, and it's a problem. I remember a conversation I had with one of my classes in high school. There was a rather large young man who was socially isolated, had no friends, and I talked to actually the boys in my class who were football players on the football team, and I said, can any of you find it in your hearts to reach out to him and try to befriend him, acknowledge him, see him? I said, we were talking about nonverbal interactions. I said, you go in the cafeteria, there's 300 people in the cafeteria having lunch. This kid comes in with a book, and he goes through his tray, and he sits down alone, and he faces a wall so he can't have to see any of the people that aren't acknowledging his existence. And he's alone, and nobody sees him. Nobody interacts with him. Nobody acknowledges him. That is deadly. Can you at least say hello? Can you say, sit with us? Can you go over and chat with him for a couple minutes? Can you make contact? Will you make the effort to do that? I think those things are really critically important in that population of young men. Well,
and maybe even, I would argue right now, just in society at large, and I understand that because of the pandemic, it's really hard to make those social connections. But when we get past this, I really hope that people take it upon themselves to check in with the people that they know.
Well, even now, for the elderly, the
You
ill.
can, you can still do it. You can still
the
do it by
widowed.
Zoom. You can do it by with a phone call. I mean, we're so much more connected today than we've ever been. We can do those kind of safety checks without going over to somebody's house.
Right.
But one of the things that I am somewhat torn on is the idea of obesity. So obesity is not technically an eating disorder.
Right.
And there's a lot of movement in our society for body positivity and to move away from fat shaming.
Yeah.
And I'm all for that, but I do think that it is important that people realize your body is not designed to carry extra weight. And when you do, that has some effect on the internal bodily organs,
Right.
whether or not people are fat shaming you. So I'm not saying that anybody who is a little bit overweight should think of themselves as having an eating disorder. I'm not shaming anybody. What I am saying is that if you are a little overweight and it's concerning to you, then that is something that you can do something about.
But caution, if you start to obsess about and rigidly control
That's a
in
good
an
point.
effort to change
Sure.
your
That's a
caloric
good point.
intake
Yeah,
or
yeah.
your body shape, you're more at risk of falling into some of
Right.
these eating disorder
Yeah,
concerns.
my hope would be that somebody who falls
the
into that
balance point.
category would ask for help,
Yeah.
and ideally and even get involved in a community. So we know
Well, and there are
that
apps
community
that you
support,
can put on your phone. If you have a cell phone, you can download apps that count your calories for the day, that help you track your exercise. Even if you start out walking 100 yards, walk one side of a block, and then two sides of a block, or four sides of, and just stretch that envelope to wherever
Right.
your comfort zone is. But you got to do it.
And most of those apps have access to online virtual communities. So
Yeah.
AA is online right now,
Right.
and a lot of these Weight Watcher programs or other programs that help people with their weight have online groups. So you can get help
Yeah.
without leaving your
you
house.
can get a sponsor that'll
Sure.
give you some support. Just don't do 13 stepping.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So for anybody who doesn't know what the 13th step is, that's when you feel like it is your job to take the message to, you have to change the world, and if people don't listen to you, that you become enmeshed with the problems of other people. Oh, okay. I thought you were going to respond to that.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, you looked like you had something on your mind. So, just to kind of sum this up, we know that there are a lot of things that are going on right now that are flying under the radar because people aren't being eyeballed on a daily basis. We know that it's difficult, it feels difficult to ask for help in the middle of a pandemic when people are being quarantined. But that doesn't have to stop people. There is help available. If you don't know where to get help, contact us at the show. We will give you resources. But I think that your idea of just looking on your phone and getting an app and getting connected to other human beings is a great first step.
Well, I think that may or may not be, but to me the issue is, can you become conscious and cognizant of the choices you're making, of your experience? Can you be present, or do you go on autopilot? Because if you go on autopilot, you're going to isolate, you're going to self-gratify, self-soothe with things that may not be healthy for you, and then you're going to get in a vicious cycle. I feel better because I ate all this ice cream, but then I'm going to wake up and be mad at myself and have to punish myself in some way, and then I'm going to be upset enough that I need to eat more ice cream. It's a horrible cycle to get into. So the more you can be conscious, the more you can be deliberate, the more you can be cognizant, and the less automated, the better off you are.
And that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
About everything. So we would love it if people would go to iTunes and rate the show and leave a comment. That is so beneficial for us here at Psych with Mike. And the music that appears in Psych with Mike, as always, is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.